Welcome to this webinar. We're really happy to have you here. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. Today's topic of discussion is Beyond the Idea, Discovering the Entrepreneur's Talent and Due Diligence. And due diligence is something that is basically a situation where you're you're discovering where the entrepreneur and the investor are discovering each other or learning about each other and in starting a collaborative relationship. And I think most of you probably know that. What we're trying to bring to this webinar is to show that this doesn't have to be a one-way process. It can actually be a two-way process, a learning process for both the investor as well as the entrepreneur. It can start a dialogue that where each one of them is learning from the process. And basically that's what we're going to be focusing on today, how this is a discovery process for both. And for example, we know that there are entrepreneurs that tend to be in the weeds doing the day-to-day and very close to the day-to-day operations, and they don't really want to let go of anything. And then there's the other classic entrepreneur who really is busy going to talk to investors and is very external facing, but doesn't really have time to get into his into their day-to-day business and look at the sales and the financial side. We don't. What we're hoping, and what NESsT developed, is an I2e tool, an Idea2Entrepreneur tool that helps the entrepreneur, balance different core competencies and different areas of strengths that they have, and to focus on the different parts of his business or their business without getting too much into the weeds or being too external facing. So how to balance all of this is basically the idea. So this is what the tool that NESsT developed, I2e, does. It helps the entrepreneur discover the different competencies that they have, and then to be able to work on them. As a way to not only attract investment, but also to really grow their business. How are we going to do this today? Well, we're going to have a dialogue that highlights what the investor looks for, what the entrepreneur learns from the process, and how the results of the tool can help guide the conversation between the investor and the entrepreneur. We will have a Q&A session for about 20 to 30 minutes at the end, but please feel free to write in your questions at any time during the webinar, and then we will make sure to respond to them toward the end when we have the Q&A. So first, I think it's time for me to introduce myself and the panelists that are joining us. My name is Nicole Eggert. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of NESsT. NESsT is an organization that it just completed its 20-year anniversary. We invest in enterprises that provide dignified employment to those most at need. We've invested over $15 million in 186 companies, generating over 50,000 jobs and income opportunities, and improving the lives of over 500,000 people. So that's us. And now I'd like to introduce you to Alex Mendez, who is the managing director of Storm Ventures. And Alex actually, he was first an entrepreneur for the first 20 or 18, I think, years of his life. And then he sold his company to Cisco for, I believe it was $10 million. And then he switched hats and became an investor. With some friends, started an investment company that manages a portfolio of about $1 billion and has invested in about 180 companies. So I was intrigued to see, Alex, that you've invested in about as many enterprises that we have at NESsT in your time as an investor. And also joining us is I'm very happy to have Simone Pissu, and Simone is the CEO of Sustainable Fishery Trade, who was an enterprise in our portfolio. Simone was born in Sardinia, where his love of the sea actually began, and his dedication and commitment to issues around sustainable fishing and marine ecosystems. He became a marine biologist, and then he went on to found SFT, which is a company that works with fishing communities throughout Latin America, helping them to adopt sustainable fishing practices while improving their livelihoods. So we also want to get to know who is on this call with us today. So we have a little bit of a survey that we want to take, ask you all to take. And the first question that we want to ask you is, who is on the call? So are you an entrepreneur, an investor, a capacity provider, a student, or other? And sorry if you fall into the other, but I'm sure whatever you're doing is super important. So if everyone could just answer this question, we can get an idea as to who is with us on the call today. Okay, so this is interesting. We have at least 50% of the folks on the call are capacity providers. Almost 30% are entrepreneurs, and there's a small percentage of investors, 6%. Others are 22, and we have no students at the moment. So I guess we didn't get as many. They're busy studying or in their classes, but we'll share with them the results of the discussion. Now I have another two questions for you. One is, do you know what due diligence is? And have you ever participated in due diligence, either in whatever capacity? So let's see what we get from this question, the results of these questions. So let's see. Don't think I see this one, but okay, so 94% of the folks on the call do know, that's great, what due diligence is. A few of you don't, but we're going to explain it. And 78% of you have participated in the due diligence process. So lots of people have gone through the due diligence, which is basically a process to really assess, that an investor uses to assess a team and a business before they decide to invest. We're going to go into it a little bit more during the webinar, so I don't want to say too much. And in fact, perhaps a good way to start is by asking Alex, who, as we saw, has invested in 180 companies, to give a few words about himself, but also to tell us what he looks for as an investor, in terms of what he looks for in the entrepreneurs as you're considering supporting them. So Alex.
Great, thank you, Nicole. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you are. So let me just add a little bit to my background so you have a little bit more history. So I actually was born in Argentina and came to the US as an immigrant, a student, and basically shaped my life and my professional career in the United States in Silicon Valley. So I like to tell people I've had 4 decades of being on the front row of the evolution of Silicon Valley, which has actually been amazing. I was an entrepreneur for 20 years, as Nicole mentioned, and was actually Cisco acquired us for $4.5 billion in 1996. And then I was there for 4 years as an executive, and then in 2000 decided to become an investor. And you kind of know the history. Nicole kind of went over that. So I've seen a lot of companies. We see probably 400 to 500 companies a year. And that's just the ones that we physically see that come into our offices. And then there's probably another, I'd say 500 to 1,000 that we see just business plans that come our way that we have to kind of screen and figure out what to do with. So at a very high level of things that we look for when we make an investment, and we're early stage investors, just to clarify. So we take a lot of risk up front. So we typically it's an idea or an entrepreneur. Sometimes they have a PowerPoint presentation, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just come in with an idea. The things we look for, the first thing is a unique and compelling value proposition. And that can be cut across a lot of different areas, but it's basically, is there something that's going to solve a problem that hasn't been solved? Is it going to change an industry? Is it going to be disruptive? And that's the first thing. And that's an area of due diligence that, we spend a fair amount of time on, depending on how technical the area is. And I'll come back to that in a minute, but due diligence is important in that area. And being able to explain what you do is important too, to an investor, from a due diligence standpoint. The second area is really around the team, and the team is, you're always going to take a risk on a team, whether it's a brand new team or whether it's an experienced team. Building a company is not easy. And so what we do is we spend a lot of time trying to understand the team's capabilities. And that's, again, where due diligence is important. And Nicole will go through the 12 competencies that we look for. But I think, does the team have any business experience? Do they have technical experience? Do they know what a business plan is? Do they know how to, explain how they're going to shape their business, what a revenue model looks like, et cetera? And I think aside from that, we also look for people that have a track record. And if they don't have a track record, that's fine. Then we look at potential, and it's basically, I call it, how much CPU horsepower do they have, or how much intellectual IQ do they have, or emotional IQ? And then the third area is really about the market. And I think for the market, I think most people underestimate market size or market opportunity. People always, investors always like to hear that it's a big market, right? And so entrepreneurs put up big slides saying it's $1 billion market. Well, by the time you dissect the market, really understand who your available audience is, the market might be a lot smaller than you think, or there may be a much more competitive environment. So we spend a lot of time doing due diligence around the market as well. And as an entrepreneur, it's really important that you understand, for your own sake, not for the investor's sake, how big the opportunity really is. Because, why give up your daytime job if you're going to go do something that's going to fail? I mean, so it makes sense to really understand the opportunity and be very vigilant of what the competitive environment is. And a lot of people underestimate that and don't really look at what the competitive environment is. And in today's day and age, with as much capital as being invested across the globe, there are a lot of companies competing for the same amount of market share. And so it's really critical to do due diligence on the market side of things. So those are really the three high-level things that we look for. And then we spend a lot of time trying to understand each of those three areas, from a due diligence standpoint.
Great. No, thank you, Alex. That's really interesting. And I think it very much would resonate with what NESsT looks for in its due diligence process, very much so, except we're focusing only exclusively on social entrepreneurs. So, of course, for us, in addition to those three very important pillars that you mentioned, we also are, of course, looking at the social impact of the companies, or the potential for social and environmental impact. Which is very, very important for us, and whether the entrepreneur is actually dedicated to that and has a vision for that and growing that impact. Stepping back a bit, what I'd like to share is a little bit about the I2e tool and how it relates to these three very important areas that you just mentioned, Alex. And basically, the tool looks at 12 core competencies that entrepreneurs should have in order to manage and grow their companies at each stage of their a different stage of the enterprise. This could be at the blueprint stage, which is basically the idea stage, also the validate stage, which is when you're trying to prove your model and your prototype and really your market. Also the prepare to scale stage, which is when you're really starting to set up systems so that you can grow. And then finally, of course, the scaling stage. And for each of these stages, the tool identifies a set of core competencies that that the entrepreneur should have at that stage, in order to be able to really grow his company, or their company. So we basically deconstructed these three pillars that Alex referred to as key into this 12 competencies, and they are both short-term and long-term competencies. So, for example, we have in the strategic thinking area, we want to make sure that there's a business model and that there's the entrepreneur is charting a path forward, so a vision and for how to really get that company off the ground and running and growing. There's the operational side, which basically is getting your cost revenue structure correct. It's getting the processes in place. It's capturing your customer feedback. It's having your metrics very clear and tracking those metrics. And having, of course, your operational team, which is super important. There's also entrepreneurial competencies around ability to mitigate challenges and risks. It's very important. So as much as you might have the best plans, you need to be able to put out fires. And also you need to prepare your company for investment. And finally, the social capital side, which is key, which is your ability to really build a network of stakeholders, to really engage with partners that are going to help you grow your company, and also to be able to really know your market. So, and the social capital that you need. So all of these competencies are important at the stage of validation. And what the tool does is it actually, it's a survey, short survey, about 39 questions that the entrepreneur takes. It takes about 20 minutes. And then it generates sort of the evaluation or assessment of where the entrepreneur is in these different competencies. And the idea here is really for it to be a learning process, to provide the entrepreneur with a snapshot of their business, and start the dialogue with the investor, right? So this is just a snapshot, and now the dialogue begins with the investor on how, or the mentor, on how the entrepreneur can really start to work on these competencies. It helps the entrepreneur create sort of a plan or a chart for moving forward. So this is a baseline for how they can move forward on these competencies in these different areas, and also what they should be emphasizing. So as I was saying before, some entrepreneurs might be emphasizing too much on the operations side and never really meeting with external investors or working with partners or trying to expand their network. Others might be doing the opposite. So the idea is really to try to get a balance in these core competencies that are so important at this stage. So again, a self-discovery process, where you have to be honest with yourself, of where you are and what you want to improve. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Simone, who actually, he's as you know, an entrepreneur that's in our portfolio, and he actually completed the I2e Talent Tool when he was going through due diligence, which is last year, this tool, helped him to then be able to leverage $200,000 in investment for his company, and of course, it started a learning process for him as well. So I want to turn it over to Simone so he can share with us a little bit about his great business, and also what did he learn through the due diligence process, and how did this process help him to discover things about himself and his company that were important. So Simone?
Hi, Nicole. Hi to everybody. Good morning. And for first, I give thanks to NESsT for inviting me and to share our lesson learned in this during this process. But before, I want to introduce a little bit more about SFT, Sustainable Fishery Trade, is the first social Peruvian enterprise that empower fishers as free actors through technology and connecting them to hidden restaurant of Lima and final consumers. We apply a transparent and 100% seafood supply chain business model where fishers only have to worry about fishing and we take care of the rest, including logistics, distribution, and invoicing. And for these services, we take a percentage of each sale. We reduce the seafood supply chain in Peru to 3 actors instead 5. The fishers, us, and restaurants. And for that, fishers receive between 30 to 50% more profit than if they sell through the traditional sale process. Also, by offering to fishers training in responsible fishing practices, we contribute to the sustainability of the ocean and showing that it's possible to be profitable while we are generating a positive impact fishers and the ocean too. But basically, SFT is made up of the love for the ocean of his four co-founders, and these lead us to, in our almost 2 years of operation, to build a relationship on trust with more than 20 fishing communities in Peru and 25 hidden restaurants. Right now, we are planning to grow our impact and business in Peru. And for that, we want to increase the number of fishers and restaurants in order to double our sale. And additionally, in the next few months, we will start the operation in Chile, where the artisanal fishery sector presents similar weaknesses. And since last year, we are in the NESsT portfolio, and we are really happy for that.
And can you, thanks, Simone, that's really, we're very happy to have you in our portfolio, and the work that you're doing through SFT is very important. I wonder if you could tell us about some of the things that you learned during the due diligence process that you went through last year with NESsT. If you could name some of the things that working on the, first of all, taking the tool that you learned.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole, for the question. It's a hard question because pick just 3 things among all the great lesson learning during the process is an hard task, but I try to do. And first, we learned that delegate function is a key point for an entrepreneur. This because an entrepreneur needs to be focused on the strategy to scale their business, and for that he needs to reduce his timing in the daily detail if he doesn't want to become sick, and this is an hard task because I think that all entrepreneurs, but us, all entrepreneur doesn't want to share his baby with nobody, but his need. An entrepreneur believes that no one could work like him, and probably it is. But it's something to do. It's need delegate functions. But once you decide to delegate some of your operational functions, this open to another problem, and maybe a disease delegate to whom? And you have maybe 2 possibilities, and these and your choose depend on money, basically. If you have the capital to invest, you can hire professionals with a great CV, and you solve your problem. But or you can create talent inside the company, and this is what we have done. Probably this way at the early stage is the best way, because you create not only workers but person really committed to your business. This is the first for us. The second one is for sure knowing your client. And to explain that, I just say you can't sell ice to Eskimos. This means that you need to know what your client needs. Anticipate their needs, become a strategic partner and not only a provider. Finally, I believe that people want to, in general, to solve problems, need to solve problems. And if you are able to solve the problem of our customer, turns you indispensable. And that is the business. So you need, I believe that you, an entrepreneur, need to have a thermometer of the need of the client in every moment, in each moment of the business. Your customer and consumer um, can be your business, your big advocates. You know, every time they interact with any aspect of your company or your offering, it influences how they feel about your offering. Make sense? So it's important to understand what your client needs, and the constant feedback is needed. Um, Third, we learn we learned that we weren't so bad because it's a process too. It's not yeah, it's like you say is as an how evaluation. You evaluate yourself, and you don't cheating on yourself. You know, so um, we had several good skills because our background, like for example the fundraising process. However, the due diligence process helped us to understand that we wasn't really ready to investment yet. Uh, and the due diligence process helped to solidify the documents, the pitch, and presentation of the business. This is important to put on the ground your ideas in short sentences, clear sentences, you know. And we use these documents and narratives uh, refined to throughout the due diligence process to apply to other competitions and succeed it. Just to mention three local scale, we won free competition, innovation competition here in Peru, and a special mention go to a global competition called Fish 2.0. Last year we had a possibility to pitch at Stanford, and we won our track has the best company, the best startup that are innovating in supply chain, and he's and showed his work is solving some sustainability problem in the fishery sector in South America. So for us was a great goal, you know, great visibility. But I won't say that in our team, we have a key person that is the CFO that make all projection, and he made a great work, great job. But you need to know what you need to do with the information that your financial projection give to you, right? So for that, NESsT help us to understand how we can read this information, and one of the problem, and what you ask to investor uh, once you have your financial projection. So what kind of tool do you need that you ask to your investor, and this depend on the stage of your business, and that's to help us to understand this. For example, if you are a company that has a great technology, and he's planning on scaling fast, maybe it's better to ask for a convertible note or a soft loan, or NESsT help us to understand that this point. And finally, that's my last thinking, is that social entrepreneur, especially is a mention for a social entrepreneur, forget that they are a business, you know. And finally, uh, uh, if you forget this detail, you will never become a company. So we understand that we are social but no NGO.
Great. Well, Simone, thank you so much for sharing those important, I think, lessons that you learned through the process. And I know that all, through the process, as NESsT was also learning about your team and about these competencies that you were discovering and learning about yourself and your team, it became clear the different roles and how you should divide up the team. So I understand that you all were working together very closely, and through the process of due diligence and through this learning process, you started to clarify the different roles, and you discovered actually that you should be the CEO of SFT, and others took on their roles as CFO and etc. So I think it was also a process for NESsT to learn and to be able to help guide you in terms of clarification of roles. I want to turn it over to Alex, and because you have so much experience, Alex, working with entrepreneurs, and I'm wondering about the three issues that Simone mentioned and how these are classic. The need to delegate, which is so important and so sometimes so challenging for entrepreneurs, is one. The need to be rigorous in capturing your sales data and learning from your customer and adapting your model to their interests and what they want, and then knowing about how your investment, how much money you should be asking for, what type of instrument you should be asking. This is something that we know entrepreneurs really struggle with, especially since in social entrepreneurship, so many of these instruments are new and are being tried, and they're very innovative. So I'm wondering if you could speak to those three, and what have you seen these when you've done your work with the, entrepreneurs, and what advice have you given to entrepreneurs at these stages in relation to these three areas?
Great, sure. Well, first off, I want to congratulate Simone for what he's doing. It's amazing. Honestly, I hadn't heard the whole story, but congratulations. And also NESsT for all the work that you do, really helping social entrepreneurs, because that's an area that I am not super familiar with, but I know about it. And I really congratulate you guys, just as a side note. But with respect to the three areas, so the first, which I'll broadly put in the category of team, I think, building a company is very hard to do, and building, especially when you're starting a company, trying to figure out who's going to do what is always difficult. If you have more than one founder, people try to figure out, well, who should be, the CEO, who should do this, who should do finance. And I think that in itself is a process you have to go through and figure out very quickly. I think, having others help you do that sometimes gives you an objective perspective, because most people sometimes think they can do everything. And the reality is that's the most dangerous thing when you're trying to build a company, is that if you try to do everything and don't delegate, it ultimately becomes unbearable and you won't be able to scale your business. So I think as an entrepreneur, you have to be self-aware and understand that at some point as you grow, that you need to let go. And many of the companies that we invest in, honestly, the conversation I often have with entrepreneurs is to say, are you comfortable with the fact that your role may not be the same role today or tomorrow as it is today? Which means you might migrate to something else. A CEO may become a CTO, or a CEO may become a chief business officer. And the best thing you want to do is not be an experiment in your own success, honestly. So if you can hire people that may help you scale your business, then that may be the right thing to do as a founder, a CEO, potentially, right? So I think really understanding and being self-aware of how you want to scale your business and what are the key areas and skills that you need, I think is important. And you should always hire the talent that you need as you're scaling your business. And sometimes it isn't based on an org chart. Sometimes it's based on opportunity. If a really bright person comes along that has talent that can make a difference in changing the course of your company, then you hire that person, not just because it's on a spreadsheet somewhere that says you need to hire them. So that's on the team side. And I think also, by nature, I think founders want to control everything. I think you have to really figure out a way to let go a little bit and get others to help you. And it could be people that you hire, it could be investors, it could be advisors, that you can help delegate certain things to, because you won't be able to do it on your own. That's my advice at the end of the day in that area. With respect to customers, I think that is it is probably the most important part of any business, no question about it. I mean, I think as a founder, as an entrepreneur, I think you have to have the DNA has to be customer first, always. You have to eat, sleep, breathe customers. You have to be able to have a pulse on your customers continuously, because that's what shapes your business at the end of the day. And the difference between an average company and a great company are the ones that pay attention to customers. And it sounds simple, but if you look at the service industry and you look at many industries, the great companies are the ones that really care about customers, and they listen to their customers, and they make changes, and they adapt, and they figure out how to get better every day. And I think that is really the key. And so as you build your business, my advice in that area is that you should keep track of your customers on day one. Figure out a way to monitor customer satisfaction, figure out a way to figure out what's working, what's not working. Be agile, which means you need to adapt and change as you go along. There are a lot of people who, I mean, after this many companies, I've seen people tell customers what they think they need, which is, it's crazy, but that happens, right? And so I think it's as an entrepreneur, and that's an area that we focus on, is trying to understand, as you're building your business, how many people did you talk to? How many customers did you talk to before you started your business? Did you really identify that there's a real problem to be solved? You know, and I'll give you an example for Storm. We focus on the enterprise side of the business. What we typically do is we will have a company that we like go speak with anywhere from 10 to 12 CEOs or CTOs of companies and explain the problem that they're trying to solve and get that feedback before we invest. So what we're trying to do is get them to actually talk to customers first. And that's part of our due diligence process. We say, you know, we love your idea, and because we have such a strong network, I can introduce the entrepreneur to CEOs or CTOs of companies, and I have them go pitch the idea, and then I get the feedback. And they also get very valuable feedback during that due diligence, because they might say, oh, I have this great idea, and then they find out that the idea may be not so great, or that there's a lot of competition, or that the product isn't completely, you know, doesn't fit with the market, and that there are a lot of product market fit issues they need to solve before they launch the business. So that's an area that I think, you know, for me, if there's anything that's the most important thing, it's customers. I think at the end of the day, you know, when I think of businesses, and that, you know, that translates into the bigger picture of how big is the market, and how much, you know, how big can you grow your company at the end of the day, right? What's the available market? The third area around capital, which is the other question you asked about, you know, I think around how do you raise capital, or how much capital you need, or when do you get the capital? I think, you know, there's a long answer to that question. I think it depends, clearly. But what the advice that we typically give people is, you know, only raise as much money as you need to get to the next value creation milestone. And, you know, the way I think about it is, and you should always be thinking about the next round of funding that you need to be able to scale your business. And it's critically important to have these milestones as a company. So think about, if I have X dollars today, or my company is valued X, what is it going to take for my company to be worth 3X over a certain period of time? And let's just say the time frame the average time frame is 18 months that people tend to use to capital. I mean, because that's a reasonable time frame where you have 6 quarters to be able to you know, meet certain goals. But then ask yourself, what, you know, in Simone, in your case, you know, what does the world look like 6 quarters from now? And what do you need to do to triple the value of your company, for example, right? And based on that, you can work backwards and say, I need to hire more people, I need to get more customers, I need more partners, I need whatever it is. And then you do a business plan, and at the bottom of the business plan falls out a dollar amount. And that's the amount of money that you would then try to go get funding for, basically, right? And you also then have to convince the people giving you the money that you're going to be able to create that value at the end of the day, right? So that's the key thing. So I think for companies, the most important part of, you know, raising money is to be very clear about the value that you want to create with that money, because at the end of the day, time is money. And so, you know, if in 18 months you're back to where you were 18 months ago, that's no good for anyone, not for the company, not for the investors, right? So be very clear about where you want to be in 18 months. And value may not be just revenue. Value may be the fact that you built a great distribution channel, or that you ended up getting a really key customer, or that you added, in your case, Simone, another 30 restaurants to the equation, for example, right, in the distribution chain. So anyway, that's the way I think about, capital, raising capital, and, how much to ask for.
No, thank you, Alex. Those are really very, very key lessons. I think someone who has seen so many companies, it's really important to hear you talk about the three sort of important drivers of success. And and I think that for a lot of social entrepreneurs, that the things that you've just mentioned are key also. Many times they're introducing products and services that are fairly new into the market, and listening to the customer is key. And I also often hear social entrepreneurs say, to what extent should I be sharing the social mission of my company? And we always respond, it's important, but at the end of the day, it's the product or the service that you're offering that's important. And yes, you're creating social impact, but you need to be able to, Simone needs to get his product to the restaurants on time when the restaurants need it, in order for him to run a business. And it's not enough to just have a strong social mission and social impact. It's also important to deliver and listen to the client. And in terms of the capital needs, I think it's also very tricky in the social entrepreneur space, because we are working with investors that are social investors or impact investors, and the instruments can be different, and valuing the companies are sometimes difficult. Exit strategies are also difficult, but there's more and more experience in these areas, and people are learning more by doing, and that accumulated experience is valuable to other entrepreneurs. It's time to open it up for questions, I think. And I know we have lots of good questions out there. And I know some of you are very eager to go off and start taking the survey, the I2e survey. So before I pass it on, I just want to show you the link to the survey where you can find it. So that after the webinar, you can do that. And just want to remind everyone that just a key message from this discussion has been self-discovery process. Hopefully the tool will help you get going on wanting to objectively make changes so that you can grow your company. I think that there's a degree of humility that you have to use in this process. I also just want to mention that the tool is also very useful to capacity providers and investors. And we've partnered with organizations already like MicroMentor that are starting to use the tool with their entrepreneurs. So if any of you on the call are interested in partnering with NESsT to start using the tool with your entrepreneurs, that would be great. And I also just want to thank the couple of organizations that helped, that were sponsors of this tool, including the Lemelson Foundation and Cisco, both of which believed in this crazy idea of this tool and helped us and backed it up with financial capital. So basically, now I'm going to turn it over to questions from all of the participants. Okay, so is this a question? Okay, so the first question that we have here is basically, yes, you can have the best value proposition, right? You can have a great team, and of course you can have a clear market demand that you've already researched and is already evident, but things can always go wrong in the implementation stage of the business. And so another help entrepreneurs to navigate some of these risks and challenges that can come up. Things, the businesses in our portfolio are in remote areas. They're working in very volatile situations. And for example, in the case of Simone with SFT, last year, SFT was affected by El Nino, for example. And I'm wondering, what are some mitigation strategies that you've used, Simone, to try to sort of deal with some of the challenges of your business, that you're dealing with the oceans, and sometimes those oceans are not as reliable as you would like. Can you mention some of the mitigation strategies that you've used,
Yes.
in terms of risks?
Yes, last year was between February and March was a really hard moment for us because we sell zero because where the climate change and the Neo current was really was really strong last year, and for that product don't arrive in Lima because all road was broken, and was really difficult to get product from the coast. Was a hard moment, but from the hard moment and failure, you learn more than the successful, And so we just understand that we need to have an alternative, a different point of supply from different part of Peru, and start to educate our client and our customer to start sell to buy frozen seafood, because it's one of the 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 things that we are trying to fix this kind of problem, because finally our climate problem, we can we can stop this kind of phenomena the way that we find together. And in this moment, when just one thing go well, is like it's like lights in the dark, because in these 2 months, with zero fish sale, at the end of these 2 months, a restaurant bought for the first time frozen razor clam. It's like the sky opened another time, and was go well again.
Great. Well, thank you. Yes, and I think that is something that is very important to be thinking about. What are some of the risks that your enterprise might confront, and what are some ways that I have a question for Alex in relation to that, and also a follow-up question. My first question is, what kind of mitigation strategies are you hoping to see when you evaluate a company? Is that something that's important for you to see that? And then follow-up question is, just from one of the participants, is how do you as an investor adapt the mentoring that you provide to entrepreneurs as they grow their businesses? So how does that change along the course of their company growth?
Thanks for that question. Well, I think the answer, again, it depends. There are a lot of different. When we're building a business, there are a lot of different risks, and I think I think part of the due diligence process for us is really to identify what the risks are. I think at the end of the day, when we make an investment, we want to make sure that we go into an investment eyes wide open, understanding all the different things that can go wrong. There's certain risks that you may not be able to mitigate. For example, climate is something that it happens, and so you just have to sort of figure out. In that example, I'd say, do we have enough capital to get through a difficult climate period so that the company can come out the other side and still have enough funding to continue their operations, for example. That would be, so sometimes having enough capital is a risk mitigation strategy. I think the other thing that we look for typically is to try not to have too much customer concentration. And, in terms of, a lot of companies, obviously you want to get customers, but then if you depend too heavily on one customer, that can change your business. So the thing that we look for, and sometimes you don't have a choice, sometimes you have to be opportunistic and you sign up a customer, but we had an example of a customer, this was before I was a venture capitalist, that, we were selling wide area networking hardware and software to phone companies. And we had AT&T was one of our biggest customers, and we had about $100 million of revenue going to AT&T out of a $500 million business. That was a very risky thing to do, and we had to manage that. But that represented 20% of our business. And, if AT&T had disappeared, we would have had a very difficult time as a company, right? Because you can't pay all your bills, and your whole model changes. So I think sometimes you just have to understand, the most important thing I think with risk mitigation is understanding what the risks are. And I think then, have sort of a backup plan if possible. And usually the three areas are around customer concentration, team, which is, do you lose key people? And what do I do to make sure that I can, if something happens, I can replace the key people so the business keeps going. And the third is capital, typically. Those are the three key areas that we tend to focus on. And try to build as best we can strategies around those in terms of risk mitigation.
And on the mentoring side, do you think does your mentoring change as entrepreneurs grow their businesses? For example, an early stage entrepreneur such as Simone versus one that already has, is preparing to scale. How does the mentoring change?
It does change, and we adapt as the companies scale. I think I'm a big fan of trying to bring high value advisors into the picture along the way, and depends on the part of the business that you're trying to shape and build. I also like the idea of being able to have non-investor board members involved in the company. I mean, investors have a certain lens that they look at things through, and then being able to attract an industry person that's a board member that can also be a mentor to the CEO. I mean, by definition, all successful CEOs were first-time CEOs, right? I mean, that's it. So every first-time CEO, and everybody was a first-time CEO. Mark Zuckerberg was a first-time CEO, right? So was Bill Gates. So at the end of the day, I think the important thing, and as an investor, I'd love to be able to back the next Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg or whatever. So we're always, and Simone may be that person. I'd love to back him and see him become somebody that that famous and successful. But along the way, I think you just need to have people that can help provide guidance. And I think mentoring, being a CEO is the loneliest job on the planet, period. And so I think you need to have outside board members that are non-investors that can help be a good mentor to the CEOs. And we usually try to provide those as we build our companies, and also, add advisors along the way. As investors, we have all the best practices in terms of, business plans and sales tactics and marketing and all the other things. Those are things that are in our portfolio of skills. But I think the human element of being able to mentor and provide guidance to a CEO and a management team is important. So I look for that to be outside of kind of the investor kind of, arena.
Great. No, thank you. And just to add to that, on the tool itself, as I mentioned before, we have 3 iterations of the tool, because the questions we're asking at Blueprint versus Validate versus Prepare to Scale are quite different. You want to see some things be constant, but some things change along the way. And as we said before, entrepreneurs need to develop and move on to the next stage. So this way we help guide them in that sense. We have another question from the audience. It's a very interesting question. It's basically about as Western societies are aging, and people over 60 are not retiring, but starting new businesses. More and more you see this. And the question is, what is your vision on seniors starting new businesses? And how does the due diligence process likely to be altered, if at all, when you look at new businesses of seniors? So I think it's a very unique and interesting question. I don't know if either one of you panelists want to try to answer that, and maybe I can think about it as well.
Well, the first question first question I have is, why would you ever want to start a business after 60? You should be on a beach, retired, you know. but having said that, if you still have the itch to go build a business, I mean, I think the due diligence process from my standpoint really doesn't change much. I think, honestly, I think you're looking for the same things. It's, you know, it's about talent, about the idea, about, you know, the opportunities. So quite frankly, I think, you know, I would approach it the same way. And, you know, without any real bias. I mean, we don't really have any bias towards age or gender, or, I mean, you know, I think you just look at it through the same lens, and you're just trying to find something that is unique, and you ask the same questions, really. I think, at least that's my quick answer.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I don't know, Simone, did you have anything to add?
So I think that is my first thinking is that it's great to see a senior entrepreneur that put him in on the pitch again, you know, and so it is say so much more about the person, you know, and may prefer be a serial entrepreneur and don't retire in the beach, you know.
Yeah, I think it's something that, yeah, it depends on the person. And one thing that I do want to add to that is that NESsT works with our entrepreneurs. There's no one, you know, type of entrepreneur. We have entrepreneurs of women, men, different ages, from the urban areas, from the rural areas. We really, you know, there is no defined definition of an entrepreneur, and I would say the same thing. I would agree with Alex on the due diligence side. It really should be the same, no matter who the person is leading the business. I don't know if we have time actually for one more question. Okay, let's see. How can we convert service to product? I'm not sure I fully understand the question. But do you, Alex, do you want to try to answer that?
Well, I think what we see quite often are companies that have been, I'll call them services companies, or companies that tend to provide a service, and what they are trying to do is turn that into software that becomes something that's more repetitive. A lot of the time people provide services and they're customized. And if you can figure out a way to take that customization and put it into something that ends up being more automated or self-serve, then, you know, then it becomes a product, and then you can have a subscription model around it. And I think we see a lot of companies that have built companies around individual, you know, contracts, or individual, they go and they do a service, and it's very customized, and I call it professional services, you know, where they end up doing a lot of things manually, or they do a lot of things customized for a customer. And the question is, can you find a common denominator that's big enough to actually go then build a business? And so I guess the answer to that question of how do I convert from service to product, and product in my mind is probably a software product, you know, that allows you to do the things as a service. I think the question is back to all the things that we said at the beginning of the webinar, which is understand, you know, what's my available market? What's the unique solution? Are there enough customers that would want to purchase this? And then figure out, you know, can I build a business model around that or not? Because, you know, a professional services business is interesting, but usually it's not something that can scale or can become very big. And so a lot of companies, once they have gotten enough customers, try to think about how can I turn this into something bigger? And that's how you would then convert it into a you know, a software product of some sort. But it's all the same questions that we would ask about any other business. You know, can you really turn it into something big or not?
Right. No, excellent. Right. I know that NESsT, we have a sustainability methodology that we've used with NGOs around the world, and hundreds of NGOs have gone through the methodology. And finally, we decided to create a product from it, Profits for Nonprofits, which is an online course, and to be able to really scale. Well, I'm going to, I think it's time to end our webinar. I want to thank our panelists. for participating and for the energy and thoughtfulness that you brought to the discussion. I also want to thank all of the participants of the webinar for joining us today, for your for being interested, and I hope that you will consider taking the tool and getting engaged with I2e. I should also mention that it is available in Spanish, so that our colleagues from Latin America and other Spanish-speaking countries can also take the tool. So thanks so much, and we will be sending out the recording to all of you, as well as to those folks that were not able to join us today. And I hope that it was a fruitful discussion for you, and that you can have some takeaways that will help you grow your businesses and help you support your the companies that you're working with, no matter where you're sitting. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you.